Where the fireflies go. Johanna was 4 when she learned what silence really meant. It wasn't the kind of silence you heard when the TV was off or when birds stopped chirping. It was the kind that clung to the corners of the house, the heavy, haunting kind that crept in after the last hug from her father, who left in a black car and never returned. After that, her mother changed. She was still there physically, but her laughter stopped visiting the house. The woman who once sang while cooking now came home at dawn, reeking of cheap perfume and smoke, her high heels clicking against the tiles like an alarm. She would collapse onto her bed and sleep until dusk, only to leave again. So Johanna, with tiny hands and tired eyes, picked up a broom, learned to fry eggs, and wipe the windows that never opened to joy. She was the girl who never smiled, the one who always sat by the window in class, tracing invisible shapes into her notebook while the world moved around her. Except for Mark. Mark lived next door, the boy with an untamable mop of brown hair, scabby knees, and a voice that carried like a summer breeze. He always had something to say, even if no one was listening, especially if Johanna wasn't. "Hey," he'd say every morning, waving a little too eagerly. "You forgot your lunch again." She would blink at him, then look away. They were classmates all through primary school, and their dynamic never changed. He'd try to talk, she'd ignore him. He'd nudge her during lessons. She'd shove his elbow back. Once, he slipped a drawing under her desk of a smiling sun and 2 stick figures, a girl with long hair and a boy holding hands. She'd crumpled it without a word, and yet he never stopped trying. It wasn't until middle school that the story truly changed. Part 2. That summer night. In their second year of middle school, Johanna found herself walking home later than usual. The sky was already bleeding orange and shadows were beginning to stretch across the pavement. She had stayed after school to clean the science lab, something she volunteered for, not because she wanted to, but because it gave her a reason not to go home. The silence of an empty room was better than the silence of her house. She took a shortcut through the small wooded path behind their neighborhood. It was rarely used, overgrown, and a bit eerie, but she didn't mind. That is, until her foot caught on a root and she tumbled, landing hard on the ground. Her knee throbbed, scraped and stinging. She sat up, blinking away tears she refused to let fall. Then she heard it, a crunch of footsteps on leaves. She turned quickly. It was Mark. "Whoa," he said, crouching beside her. "Did the forest attack you or something?" "What are you doing here?" she snapped, more embarrassed than hurt. "I was following you," he said, as if that were the most natural thing in the world. "You're not exactly subtle." She glared at him, but he ignored it. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said. "You're bleeding." I said, "I'm fine." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled a small packet of tissues from his bag and gently dabbed at her knee. She winced. "I said I heard you," he said quietly. "But sometimes people say they're fine when they're not." The words made something shift in her. For a long second, neither of them spoke. When he was done, he sat beside her on the forest floor, their backs leaning against the same tree. "Why do you keep bothering me?" she asked softly, eyes on the canopy above. "Because you look like you need someone," he replied, "even if you don't want them." She swallowed hard. "That's a stupid reason." "Maybe," he smiled, "but it's mine." That was the first night she didn't push him away. They sat there until the fireflies came out, little lights blinking like stars made of breath and magic. He pointed one out, and she actually smiled, just barely. He caught it, and never forgot. High school arrived with heavier textbooks and heavier hearts. By then, Joanna and Mark weren't exactly friends, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They didn't ignore each other anymore. Sometimes they even studied together. She let him walk her home a few times. He never asked for more. Then came Roy. Roy was everything Mark wasn't. Older, confident, effortlessly charming. He was the kind of boy girls whispered about and boys wanted to be. He noticed Joanna one afternoon when she dropped her bag and all her papers scattered across the hallway floor. He helped her pick them up, said something that made her laugh, a rare, real laugh. And from then on, he was a constant presence. Mark noticed the change immediately. Joanna smiled more, wore her hair differently, hummed under her breath. But there was also distance. A polite wall that grew higher with each passing week. When Roy kissed her at the school festival under the falling paper lanterns, Mark saw it from a distance. He didn't say anything, but he didn't stay to watch either. Roy was her first real boyfriend. He bought her roses and held her hand in public. He said things like, "forever" and "only you." And for a while, Joanna believed him. But there was always a part of her that felt like a guest in her own heart. Something never quite clicked. Roy made her feel beautiful, but not understood. Safe, but not seen. Mark, on the other hand, understood her silences. He never demanded she explain herself. He just showed up. One night, months into her relationship with Roy, she found herself walking the same wooded path from years before. Her mind was cluttered. Roy was her first real boyfriend. He bought her roses and held her hand in public. He said things like, "forever" and "only you." And for a while, Johanna believed him, but there was always a part of her that felt like a guest in her own heart. Something never quite clicked. Roy made her feel beautiful, but not understood. Safe, but not seen. Mark, on the other hand, understood her silences. He never demanded she explain herself. He just showed up. One night, months into her relationship with Roy, she found herself walking the same wooded path from years before. Her mind was cluttered. Roy had just canceled on her again. His excuses were getting lazier, his messages shorter. She heard footsteps again. This time she wasn't surprised. "Hey," Mark said, slower than usual. "Hey." They walked in silence for a while. "You okay?" he asked, just like he did years ago. "No," she whispered. He didn't ask why, just took off his hoodie and gave it to her when he noticed her shivering. They sat under the same tree where she had once fallen. "I miss this," she said quietly. "This? You." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You have Roy now." "I know," she said. "That's the problem." A week later, Johanna ended things with Roy. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting, just a quiet conversation in the school courtyard. Roy seemed more relieved than hurt. That stung, but it also set her free. She didn't run to Mark. In fact, she avoided him for days. Something about admitting how she felt terrified her. She had spent so long building walls. Could she survive tearing them down? He didn't push. He never did. One afternoon, she found a drawing tucked into her desk. It was a smiling sun and two stick figures holding hands. This time, she didn't crumple it. She folded it carefully and placed it in her notebook. Then she ran to find him. When she did, he was sitting by the riverbank near the old bridge, feet dangling above the water. "Mark," she said, breathless. He looked up. She sat beside him, closer than ever before. "I think I'm ready," she whispered. "For what?" "To stop pretending I don't care." He smiled, not the big goofy one he always gave everyone, but the soft, warm one he saved just for her. "I've been waiting," he said. Their fingers found each other, like pieces of a puzzle that had been misplaced for years. And for once, Johanna wasn't alone. Like, share, subscribe for more.